Hello, everyone, and congratulations on making it to the final session of today of this year's SNOMED CT Expo 2024. This is the Terminology Leading Practices stream, and just want to give a very special thank you to B2I for sponsoring this stream. My name is Suzy Roy, and I am the Collaborations and Research Engagement Specialist here at SNOMED International, and I'll be moderating today's session as well as presenting, so we'll have a little switch here. And I will also be presenting with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Alejandro Lopez Osornio. We will be presenting about the International Patient Summary, IPS Adoption and Implementation with SNOMED CT. As always, all questions will be answered at the end of the session, and those who are online, please just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be sure to facilitate those questions. All right. Let me get myself situated up here now. Okay. Thank you for that little switch there. And so today what we really wanted to do was kind of provide a little bit more information about what SNOMED International does to support the International Patient Summary. So what we're hoping today is that you will learn a little bit more after Rob and Ismat's presentations and what we can provide in addition to that. Discover what we do to support that implementation, and also, of course, where to find those resources that we make available. So we have been here all week in the last couple of days, especially learning more about SNOMED CT. And really what I wanted to provide here was just that SNOMED CT, what we're really looking at now, it's been adopted and implemented around the world. We have now 50 members who span globally, who are members of SNOMED International, but SNOMED CT is also implemented and adopted in over 79 countries around the world. And so what we're starting to really focus on is helping those who are implementing so that we can actually achieve semantic interoperability. And one of those ways is via the International Patient Summary. And this is really key. So SNOMED CT, what we're starting to look at is that it is used as a reference terminology, a terminology hub. And you're going to start to see that more and more in our next strategy of how and where we're going with SNOMED. And it's not just use of SNOMED CT by itself, but you're implementing more than just SNOMED CT. You're also implementing HL7. You're also implementing LOINC, NPU, and many, many more. And how is it that you can actually take SNOMED CT terminology and these other standards to really start to capture, encode, and really transmit all of those data? And so that's what we're really trying to do here with at least the IPS, to really provide that minimal basis of how and what you can capture for patient data. Next slide, please, Chris. Thanks. And Rob already showed this earlier, but again, I wanted to show this here because what we're talking about here is a minimal data set that you can collect for, my health information, your health information, everyone's health information. Make sure that it's something that's specialty agnostic. It is non-exhaustive, but also still clinically relevant, and be able to implement that in a very simple way that's not going to overburden both the clinicians and also the implementers, or even when you're trying to just get that critical information from one facility to another facility, this small data set. And so the IPS, next slide please, is a ecosystem of artifacts that have been put together by collaborating standards development organizations, and I'm going to say SDO, and I apologize, I fall into that alphabet soup pie hole really, really quick, so please just flag me if I start to do that. But essentially, the IPS has really been the coming together of those in the field who are actually implementing, as well as brother and sister SDOs. And so for the past number of years, these standards have really worked together to create artifacts so that you can take up and adopt IPS. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit more information and not just our fabulous logos of each of the SDOs. But this really starts to show you that, SEN has provided general guidance for the EHN EU patient summary guidelines, and that ISO has provided additional head standard guidance. But then we also work very, very closely with HL7 in the production of HL7 fire value sets for IPS. And those fire value sets are terminologically bound to SNOMED CT. And also IHE provides profiles so that if you decide to utilize IHE, you can do so within the IPS framework. And so this is just a very high level overview. But of course, we are here at a SNOMED CT conference. So you can see that we have SNOMED CT in the middle there. And so that's what we're kind of going to focus in on today. Next slide, please. A number of years ago, we started to work with HL7 in particular on the production of the IPS free set. So essentially, any concept that is utilized within any of the minimum data sets that Dr. Howsam presented in the first presentation in the stream, any of the content, the clinical content that is needed in any of those classes, in those data elements, we made them available. We bundled them all together in a flat file, and we produced the SNOMED CT HL7 free set. And again, this was harmonized with not just the HL7 patient summary, but also those artifacts that were in production by SEN for the European standard for the patient summary. Then after, we actually, because we had this fabulous new tooling where you can actually create sub-ontologies of the SNOMED CT terminology, we started to create the IPS terminology, and we made this, again, freely available. And so this essentially takes the IPS free set and then also provides the parent concept for all of those IPS concepts so that you can start to provide a grouping mechanism for all of those IPS concepts. But of course, we wanted to make sure that those who are in member countries or who have a license to utilize the full version of SNOMED CT, you can do so. And so what we're starting to do is talk about how can we help you, no matter what flavor of SNOMED CT that you particularly implement in your solution, are you able to do that? And so, next slide. I have my esteemed colleague, Alejandro, who's going to provide some more of the technical information on that.
Okay. So Suzy described how before we distributed flat list for the IPS ref set. Well, this is just a plain list, yes, and the free set. Oh, I need to ask for that. Next slide. And the free set. So Suzy described also that the evolution of that list was to provide something that can be used as a terminology, as a full terminology. And that's what created this IPS terminology that is based on the concepts included in that free set, but also, like Suzy described, all the parents. So it's a complete ontology, all the attributes and all the values and all anything that is necessary to construct a small ontology that is applicable specifically to IPS. And that led to the creation of this resource that contains 15,000 concepts, more concepts than before, because we added all the auxiliary concepts to create the logic ontology. And this is what is completely available for free. You can go to the IPS terminology site, you can register, and you can download the file. And this is something that is meant to be used in non-member countries. Yes, people in member countries have their own national editions that are much more complete. They have much more diversity. You need to use your edition. And the free set is the IPS terminology is something that is used in non-member countries. But we still publish the IPS ref set inside the international edition that can be used in any country. So you are aware of what's the scope of the free content related to IPS, and you can use that when you work in your interoperability scenarios. Yes. There's a browser. If you go to IPS browser, snomedtools.org, you can browse the small ontology related to IPS. Next. So when you want to use the IPS, this is how you implement IPS. Usually what you do is you start to decide how you will create the IPS file based on the bindings reported on the IPS implementation guide. Yes, and for each one of the resources, like the condition resource, the medication resource, the procedure resource, the guide that Rob maintains in HL7 International contains all the details about what's the terminology binding for each field. Next one. So, and the bindings are expressed in the terms of value sets. And the value sets are intentional value sets that are constructed using some kind of logic. Yes. So this is an example of a value set, for example. A value set could say that the value for a field inside one of the resources of the IPS are all the clinical findings plus all the events plus all the situations. And that's the definition of the value set. And because we want anyone to be able to use the IPS with their own content, the definition is made in an abstract way. And that abstract way can be executed over any substrate. Yes, if you are working with the international edition because you're in a member country or you're an affiliate, you can expand that value set and you have 124,000 options. But if you're in the US, you actually will use the US edition, and the US edition adds additional content. So you have a bit more, 129,000. And maybe in Canada, you have a bit less because it's a smaller national edition. But if you don't have access to SNOMED either because you're not in a member country and you're not an affiliate, you can use for free the IPS terminology and use the same rule, the same value set will expand to a smaller number of concepts. So in that case, you will have almost 7,000 concepts that comply with this expansion rule in the IPS terminology. And this is how different people use the IPS with the same rules, but they have different breadth on different level of detail to record in the IPS. You might be wondering if I use different codes, how this is interoperable. Just if I write codes here that are not available there, how do I resolve that? And the next slides are a bit of, we've been discussing this in many other meetings during this week about how to improve interoperability between extension, between versions. So we already said that many times. Sorry if some of you were in those presentations. But this is an example of all the value sets. Rob did a great work all this year to normalize this, to have them all in a standard way that can be applied to any edition. So this is, if you go now to the IPS guide, you will find the latest version of all the value sets, and it's really good, and you can expand them over any SNOMED substrate that you have available. Next one. So what happens if the challenge is how you share, for example, in the extreme edition from a member country with a non-member country. Yes, so if you are receiving an IPS from a non-member country, you are in a member country, that's perfect because they use a smaller set of concepts and you have all the concepts. So that's fine, you have no problem. But when it goes in the other way around, yes, you need to take into account that this document, this IPS resource that you are creating, yes, will be used in a space where they may not have access to the fullest novel. So maybe you can do something to help them in that way. Or maybe they can also have access to like a public server to compute equivalence and things like that. But the easiest way to resolve the interoperability challenge is that when you send the code, you send, for example, the Canadian code, but also you attach a code that is an ancestor of your code that is a member of the IPS ref set. And this is something that can be done programmatically and automatically. Next one. So if you're using ECL, it's possible to convert a concept from a national edition or the international edition to the IPS terminology because we have the international patient summary ref set. Yes, and this is a complex operation that in the FIRE expansion, but this is really something that you change the values and you use it again. It's something that you don't need to think every time you do it. So in this case, we have a very narrow concept, opercular epilepsy, which is a very specific type of epilepsy that is part of the international edition, but it's not on the IPS ref set because the IPS ref set is based on frequency of use, and this is a very rare disease. So if you do this operation, you're using that ECL, that is like a query that says, give me all the ancestors of opercular epilepsy that are also members of the international patient summary. And if you do that part, you will get maybe 20, 30 concepts. So you need to reduce that to the closest ones that are just above opercular epilepsy. So you do a minus and you subtract the ancestor of the ancestors. When you do that, it's like a small algorithm. When you do that, you get a single concept in this case. You may get two in sometimes because sometimes concepts have two parents. But in this case, you get a single one and you know that it's a localization related epilepsy. And that's a concept that belongs to the IPS ref set. And this is a concept that can be understood worldwide and regardless of whether they have a SNOMED license or not. Next one. If you want to try this in real time, we have like a demo site. If you go to implementation portal, there's in the showcase, you will find the demonstrators, and there's an IPS demonstrator. And in the IPS demonstrator, you can navigate the different sets like allergies and intolerance, problem list, immunizations. Those follows more or less the value sets that are in the implementation guide. But then you have the interoperability demo, and that this allows you to search any concept in SNOMED CT, and then you click, and it will find automatically the corresponding concept in the IPS ref set. So you can play around, and below you have like an example of what's the logic that is running behind the ECL. So this is how you can transform between editions, and you can keep it interoperable even if you use in IPS, if you use your national extension. This is similar. So if you are in Canada and you want to share with the US, probably you need to do the same, but instead of using the IPS ref set, if you know it will go to the US, use international edition. So it's like you have three levels. You have the national level with more detail, the international complete SNOMED level with a lot of detail, and then you have the IPS ref set with a smaller level of detail. Next one. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandro, and awkwardly myself. Oh, no, stay up there for, oh, yeah. Stay up there, no. All right, and with that, we will open up the floor. I do have a couple of questions that are coming in online, so I will field those first. Dr. Michelle Roof, thank you for joining us. So she says, many thanks for this presentation. Perhaps the first use of the IPS in country rather than cross-border, I'm sorry. Perhaps the first use of the IPS is in country rather than across border, which would be the next step. Imagine an EHR and LIMS as a minimum digital systems. These connect to a terminology server. Then there needs to be a portal for the patient and providers to view the IPS. Is this generally correct? And then she follows up with the IPS is not primary data entry, but rather an extract from the digital system. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's a very important role inside countries as well for the IPS to communicate between systems. When you're building the data structure that will communicate the systems in your country, sometimes one of the first you do is to communicate the summary, just to have a clear idea about the patient. And then based on that, you keep going to medication requests and things that are included in the IPS, but you want to start separating them. Yeah, that's an important role there.
Yep, that is correct. Opening it up to the floor. Yes.
Really to comment on ISMA and also
Yes, of course, yes.
sharing the experience to all of these. At first, this is a good news that we are from the Asia eHealth Information Network, the AHIN, and we have uh, at least a very active country like Malay, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and all the others that are the member. And we kind of come to agree that we should do the IPS at least for common working and sharing knowledge between and use the IPS for Hajj pilgrimage as the maybe the use case because of Indonesia and Saudi Arabia also working on that. This is what we will go back and working in our network that can be from that. Now sharing the experience, I like Ishma said that interoperability save life, and I will use that. But to me, I think interoperability is semantic interoperability is part of the interoperability, and it's on the data part. The technical part, I think, is not difficult. The people and organization is very difficult. For instance, as the comment from the online that I also agree that using IPS to be inside the country first. If you succeed, it will be, I mean, the first win, and it will be easy to do across border. The challenge is that at the data level, the data element, to agree upon which one will be which system are they going to provide all these agree at the data element in IPS. It's not easy. It's not easy. Not go to the semantic side. Semantic side is another step that you have to work with. For instance, for the patient identifier, not every country has the citizen ID. That is the big challenge. The provider identifier, that is another big challenge. Now come to the last one. This is what I learned over 20 years that about the interoperabilities. To me, I think ministry, organization, people always said that they would like to have the interoperabilities, and it's not the technical side, it's the people side. They don't talk. And what I found that ministry, organization, people are seeking for power, not the patient-centric, like Ishmat says. And so this is a big challenge to every country. We are do just SNOMED CT, just a piece of the whole pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was kind of alluding to at the beginning. You know, we're trying to make sure that it's not just siloed with one standard. You know, we are setting up so that SNOMED CT is the kind of the hub on the capture of the clinical data. However, it's not just SNOMED CT, it's a number of other standards as well in order to capture the whole picture. So absolutely. Yeah, I think I saw another hand up there. Yes.
Yes, my question may be a bit technical, but from what
That's what I have my implementation
Okay.
seat up here for. So.
From what I understand, the way to generate this is that I send the $sign summary to the file server to get the bundle document, and then convert all the code to be in the IPS terminology before sending it to somewhere, right? Is that what you mean?
Yes,
mean by-
depending, the IPS usually collects information that is already recorded somewhere else. And depending the codes you are using there, maybe you need to map to SNOMED to include it. And maybe when you map to SNOMED, you map to International Edition because, for example, you're in Thailand, you can use the complete edition. But when you want to share with a country like Nepal, that maybe it's not part of SNOMED, you want to transform that into the IPS terminology to reduce a set of codes so it's compatible. But there's a transformation and from the original data to when it's included into the IPS.
We also have the SNOMED IPS, I'm trying to think of the official title of it, user guide
Yes.
that is linked to it from our slides, and it's on our webpage, and also the HL7 fire specifications implementation guide also has further information, and all of that information can also be found on the International Patient Summary.net website, which is the collaborative resource that all of the SEOs work on together. All of those resources for those technical specifications are linked to on there as well. I see a question from Diego.
Just a comment on the question.
Yes.
You can obtain an IPS from a server that supports the dollar summary operation.
Mhm.
asking for the specific patient, and the server will gather the information from whatever it wants, and will code if necessary with SNOMED the conditions and the problem and the immunizations and medications, and that's not the only way, but it's where we are going, I think. In the past, we have been asking, give me this type of document, which was the document type in login for the IPS, and the server may have one document inside and will give you that document directly. But this thing is create a summary for me based on the information you have inside and using the terminology that the IPS defines. And in fact, if you use FireHappy, which is a specific open source server, it allows you to run the summary operation without doing nothing. With the information that is inside, it will create the IPS for you.
Thank you. And Diego, don't worry, next year you'll be up here with us.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay, if not, with that, I'd like to conclude this block of sessions. And actually, I'd like everyone to give yourselves a round of applause as well. Thank you so much to everyone for attending the SNOMED CT 2024 Expo. Just to let you know that the SNOMED CT Expo 2025 will be held in Antwerp, Belgium, and we look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank you so much.